My role at the ASRC is that of a volunteer coordinator. That role can be quite deceiving because it is actually a gateway and an enabler for the model that we're going to talk about today. Before I delve into sort of detail of what symbiotic innovation is, and I will say, and I will call it SI a lot as an abbreviation, so don't be confused. When it comes to symbiotic innovation, and as we go into getting into the details and breaking it down, bear in mind that while it's a mouthful, it is program innovation. Yeah? So before we understand what program innovation is, what do you guys know about innovation? What is innovation? Anyone? Evolving. Good. New concepts. Inventing. Yeah. So I guess the consensus would be that whether it's evolution, whether it's invention, whether it's new concepts and ideas, I guess when we talk about symbiotic innovation, when we talk about program innovation, it's not inventing something new per se. It is just a new way of doing things. Yeah? Bear in mind that innovation does not have to be invention all the time. It is not invention all the time. A lot of times it is just a new way of doing things. And a lot of times, as Maven pointed out, it is evolution, and how that evolution happens is we reflect, we think back, we reflect on how we used to do things. Yeah? And based on the things that we did well, we learn from them, we bring them back into our day-to-day, and believe it or not, a lot of the things that we used to do well actually worked. So a lot of times we're just bringing that back and utilizing the same way of doing things again. Yeah? So I guess the reason why this type of innovation resonates with me so much is that I come from a refugee background. So a lot of times going through a system, this system that is the immigration system, if you want to call it, in Australia, it's very complex, it's very unpredictable, it changes almost every day, and you can never tell what's going to happen to you. You are just this passive passenger who's being taken for a ride. Yeah? A lot of times you don't know what your rights are, what your responsibilities are, you don't know the system, you don't know the legal aspect of the system, and you're just being put through it. Yeah? And what happens then? As a person seeking asylum, as a refugee, you have a sector now. Dana and I joke about it, we call it the compassion industry. You have this industry now, you have this sector, yeah? And that is composed of three parts, yeah? So you have the people who provide funding, who provide donations, the philanthropists, and I want you guys to remember this throughout this conversation because I'll come back to it, yeah? If I don't come back to it, remind me, because there's a lot to go through. So you've got the donors, funders, yeah? Let's use that terminology. Then you've got the agencies, you've got the NGOs, the not-for-profits, the community organizations, yeah? I'll use the word agency a lot there. And then you've got community, yeah? And in this case, when I say community, it can be any community experiencing disadvantage. You notice how I didn't say disadvantaged community? Yeah? So it is an experience. Similarly, homelessness is an experience. People will get out of that. People will succeed. People will triumph, and they will move on from that. Yeah? Similarly, seeking asylum. Similarly, other experiences of disadvantage. They're just an experience. So the third part is that community experiencing disadvantage. In this case, people seeking asylum, because it's a massive group of people. Yeah. Now that we've sort of seen that there's the three components, we want to look at what role SI has to play here, what role you guys have to play in this, whether we use SI to approach these three aspects, these three components, and how can we support, whether it's donors and funders, how can we support whether that's the community experiencing disadvantage, or how can we work with the agencies within which we might be working or volunteering, or how can we improve and improvise on the models that they utilize. Yeah? So those are the three components, and this is where symbiotic innovation comes in. When we talk about symbiotic innovation, before I get into the technical side of things, the technical aspects of things, I want you to remember that it's not just a model, it's a mindset, it's a philosophy, it's a culture. Yeah? And bearing in mind that what that culture is, what that mindset is to just question yourself. Yeah? A lot of times, and recently, as Dana and Maven will know, we will come across people who do not understand their own power and privilege. So it's a great tool for educating people about that as well. Yeah? It's a very good, subtle, very covert way of explaining to people what power structures do, what privilege does, how we can support people who are experiencing disadvantage, and there's a system, there's an entire system that they have to deal with. So when I say we question ourselves, it is that question of, well, why are we doing something? Yeah? Let's say you volunteer or you run a program or a project. Why are you doing that? Yeah? What is the impact of that? Yeah? So when you always, when you start with a project or you start with a program, remember it has to be measurable. It has to have impact. Not just outcome measures, but an impact measure. So I would recommend you all, we don't have a lot of time today, but go and read up on theory of change. Yeah? So let's say, as an example, we want to change the narrative around people seeking asylum. We want to change the narrative around Muslims and how we're constantly labeling them terrorists, and the whole problem that is, it's not actually a problem, but the problem-based approach around these conversations. Yeah? So how would we change that? Through media outlets and strategy and comm strategies and messaging projects, right? But my impact statement using theory of change would be, I want to see in Australia where Australia is not just John and Sam. Australia is Abdul, Safar, Muhammad, yeah? Any of those names. I want to see that Australia, yeah? So that would be my impact statement. And I would do all of these things in terms of strategy, in terms of projects, in terms of actually taking action. Those would be our actions. And let's say 5 years down the road, how do we measure that impact? By doing language analysis, by doing media analysis. Yeah? 5 years down the road, recently they did one on the New York Times, and guess what? New York Times is pretty bigoted. Yeah? They did a language analysis on the New York Times, and turns out that they are very anti-Muslim, despite what people say or think. So that's a concept I wanted to introduce as well, but bearing in mind that there is theory of change. There are a lot of aspects of that you will have to use and look at later on if you want to know more and learn more. So when it comes to SI, and those three components, we have to look at our approach. And like I was saying, in terms of the projects, programs, the volunteering, the jobs that you might have with community organizations, what is it that you are doing? What is the impact of that? And how that's measured? And what are those measures? Yeah? The measures that you have, are those just the KPIs of the organization? Are those personal KPIs? Are those the feel-good stories that you have? Or are those measures actually coming from the people, that community that is experiencing disadvantage? What do they think? Is your program actually successful? Yeah? So while we're having those conversations, and just to add some more context and actually mess with you guys a little bit, bear in mind that there are 59 million people who are displaced in the world. Some people say 60 million. And then you have 11, 12 million people, and the figure is growing, who are people seeking asylum, right? And as an example, the ASRC works with what, 2,000, 3,000 people a year? What happens to the other 8,000 in Victoria? Yeah? So now, slowly, we'll understand why there's a need for a new model, a new way, a new approach. Yeah? Because the current models are all created around a response to crisis. Yeah? There's 10,000 people. We need to work with all of them. Yeah? And we end up working with 3,000, and we don't do a great job of that anyway. Yeah? The other problem is that the measures that I was talking about, but also the fact that there is no voice, no utilization of the resources within that community experiencing disadvantage. We don't utilize them. We don't value their experience, their expertise. So their voice is completely missing in this whole debate and this whole experience. And then these models, these programs that we have, they're funded 6 months, a year. Their lives depend on them. How do we sustain these programs, these projects, these organizations that we've created? If for them it is a way of life, they'll find a way to sustain it. Whereas for us, it's just a program, it's just a project. Yeah? Now, bringing those pieces together, what we did in the Innovation Hub was that we are the technicians, as I like to call us. These are the experts. Yeah? The people with the lived experience who are living in the community every single day, whether it's in pursuit of employment, education, whether it's basic needs. Yeah? They're living it. When you and I leave our jobs or whatever our role is in this space, we go home and that's it. For them, they live it every single day. So why is it that they are not part of the solutions that are created? Why is it that when we create our programs, our projects, they are not part of the conversation? So what's conventionally what happens is that what we do is we have an agency, right? An organization, project, program, as you all know, we've talked about it. We put people through this program of ours, this project of ours, they come on the other side, and then they go back into the same community that is experiencing disadvantage. The program that we created in the first place is based on our perspective of that disadvantage. Yeah? We have this so-called idea of consultation, but when people don't own a solution, why would they sustain it? Yeah? A very good friend of mine from Kenya told me a story about how these people from a certain organization in their fancy white Land Cruisers came in and they had the letters U and N on them. I won't say any more. And they built these wells for them because they thought, well, we're doing something great here. We need to do this. We need to solve the water supply problem in this area. Yeah? And then they built these fancy wells and then they left in their fancy white Land Cruisers. What happened then was the community was furious because the women used to walk 2 hours each day to and back to get water. And that was the time where they used to socialize. That's the power of what the community knows. That knowledge, that experience that they have, that's the power that we might not have. So similarly, that's what an agency does. We have a system, a process, we have this rack 'em and stack 'em, and we put people through it. They come on the other side, and then they go back into that same system where they might experience disadvantage again. Now, we don't realize that these people have connections, these people have resources, they are resourceful, and they can bring with them a lot of skill, a lot of talent, a lot of resource, a lot of networks within that community. So essentially, what services we provide, we could add scale to that. Yeah? When I say scale, if someone here has a skill or a talent or an ability, and we work with them, we train them on using that and educating others, they will be able to share that with their communities. Yeah? You won't have to rely on our organization or project or idea. Yeah? There's a reason why we're filming this today. Yeah? Or there's a reason why we're hoping to train you guys in the same so that you can do the same. So that you don't have to come to us constantly for this. And what happens when you keep coming to us? We have the power. And we all know what power structures do. So, we realized, and as I was saying earlier, volunteering was a gateway. We brought in people, we gently said, well, volunteering is a great opportunity, you can improve your English language skills, you can utilize your skills and resources within the organization, and you won't be lonely and sad and depressed at home, you'll build confidence, we'll give you references for when you apply a job. But what we didn't tell them initially, because this was a massive experiment and we didn't want to freak people out initially, we involved them in the development of programs, in the development of solutions. Some of the volunteers now are actually staff members in our organization. They don't know, but we had planned that for them. We're evil. So, we started with solution development. People who have the lived experience, who are experiencing issues, problems, challenges every day, they were in the room with us as equals. And when they suggested something, when they gave us an idea or a thought, we took it seriously. We actually followed through. And even when it came to service delivery, they were involved. Yeah? Initially as volunteers, and some of them now staff. And what happens then is we become a component of the community rather than us being this powerful organization that exists 9 to 5. What happens outside of 9 to 5? Where is the community going to go? Where do you guys go when you can't solve a problem that falls between 9 to 5? You rely on friends, you rely on family, you rely on community. So what we're trying to do with this model is educate that agency model. I'm not saying we get rid of all agencies. That would be stupid. But I'm saying we change the agency model where the community is owning the solutions. So that once they're ready, whatever solution, program, project we've developed, we can push it out into the community, teach them, work with them to sustain it, and then they can take over. Yeah? So let's say we had a member come in, and this member is actually a staff member now, so we still don't add his name because we don't want him to be too famous. But Jibril, who talked at the conference. Jibril came to us and he used to be a professional soccer player. He just said, well, I just want to play soccer, social community development program, I just want to play soccer. And he started as that, and then we said, well, why don't you, volunteer 1 day a week, you look after the admin side of things, you help the guys warm up, slowly building capacity over time, but honestly, with honesty. Empowerment is about honesty. So over time, we said, well, Jibril, you do all this stuff, why don't you start thinking about coaching the team then? Slowly, Jibril starts coaching the team. Over time, Jibril, notice how when you give someone responsibility, you have to give them authority. It can't be tokenistic. When that happened, he was part of the decision making, he was part of the development, he was part of management, and over time, when he had developed, refined the knowledge and skills, he went out and opened his own academy. Now, it's up to him how to sustain that. Yeah? Jibril now is one license short of being able to coach at a club level in Melbourne, in Victoria. Yeah? So, when it comes to SI, it is putting the power back into the community, because for them, it's a way of life. For them, sustaining it ensures that the program in the first place, why it was started, what the need was, and what action we take is sustained. Yeah? So there's a very good TED Med by America Bracco, the lady whose quote I used initially. There's a TED Med by America Bracco, and she's the CEO of Latino Health Access. I would encourage you guys to watch that TED Med. And also a second video where she responds to some really important questions by some of the leading medical practitioners in the United States. It's a perfect example of the community looking after each other, the community solving its own problems, the agency becoming a tool provider, a resource provider, or just providing confidence, just providing a direction. Yeah? Even now, when people, like recently I was approached by a documentary maker. It was the AIDC, Australian International Documentary Makers Conference or something. And she approached us and said, I actually want to make a documentary about refugees and their first year of schooling in Australia. I said, great, it explores some important and unique issues and challenges, but why are you approaching us? And they said, well, you guys are a great resource. And I said, did you seriously talk about people seeking asylum and refugees as a resource for your documentary? And she was a bit shocked and taken aback, and I was like, well, they're not the resource for your documentary. Yeah? Don't treat them like that. They're not passive subjects. Yes, you're exploring a major issue, but if you want to involve them, you're doing it the wrong way. Go and embed yourself into that community. Go and talk to some community leaders. Yeah? But if they come to the agency, we have this selected group of people who we will put in front of them and say, work with these people. Is that a true, real representation of that group of people? It's not. Did that happen organically? No, it didn't. Yeah? So the agency is becoming more and more a power structure, because 9 to 5, yeah? You're in, you have your problem solved, you're not there, well, big deal. Yeah? Bad luck. So I thought I'd introduce you guys to the concept and the idea. And like I said, this is just a teaser, if you like. But bearing in mind that because it's about the community, have faith, the community will be involved. It's their issue, it's their challenge, their problem. They will want to take ownership. So share that with them. And remember that when we talk about the Innovation Hub, we created this empowering space, but it's not just empowering for them. It's also empowering for us. Yeah? We have learned so much from these people because we treated them as equals, and they had the confidence, the faith, the belief that in return we would also listen to them. We would learn from them. Yeah? And we have. We have. Thank you so much, guys. Thank you very much.